There is meetings tomorrow.
There you go, Mark.
Today's the
Check
third.
to make sure that his mic is turned on.
Yeah, it's tomorrow.
Perfect.
Good.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, we'll call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Osterloo,
Yeah, here.
Genslinger,
Here.
Oh, wait.
Sonny,
Here.
Penny, Dosher,
Here.
Jerza,
Here.
Malumbi,
Here.
Larson. We have a quorum.
Declaration of conflicts of interest. Anybody got anything on that? Seeing none, approve the agenda.
We do need to amend it. I have the wrong ordinance number on number 8. It should be 01, not 02. It was published correctly to the paper. I just have it wrong on the agenda itself.
Okay, so noted. Anything else?
Move to approve with amendment. Second.
Got a motion to approve with the amendment. Roll call, please.
Genslinger,
Yes.
Sonny,
Yes.
Jerza,
Yes.
Osterloo,
Yes.
Malumbi.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Approval of minutes from the meeting on 1/10/22. Any additions or corrections? Hearing none, we're ready for a motion.
Move to approve. Second.
Got a motion to, and a second to approve. Roll call, please.
Sonny,
Yes.
Genslinger,
Yes.
Osterloo,
Yes.
Jerza,
Yes.
Malumbi.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Schedule next meeting, February 14, 2022 at 12 p.m.
And we do have items for that, so we will be meeting on the 14th.
Set the date.
Got a motion to approve and a second. Roll call, please.
Jerza,
Yes.
Osterloo,
Yes.
Genslinger,
Yes.
Sonny,
Yes.
Malumbi.
Yes.
Motion carried.
We've got a plot, lots 25 and 26 of the Islands First Division addition, a subdivision of the southeast one quarter of Section 31, City of Mitchell.
So this is a little bit different. They came to us, they wanted to put it into one lot and call it 24 or 25, 26 or something like that. We didn't want to get rid of one of the lots because if you do that in the master plan, someone starts looking 5 years down the road asking what happened to that lot number. So they're plotting the two lots together. They plan to actually build across, so that's why there is no utility easement or drainage easement going between lots 25 and 26. They will go to register deeds, Department of Equalization, sign a form there that puts those two parcels together as one. So there'll always be taxed as one, it'll be shown as one parcel, and that's what will allow them to be able to build across the two lot lines without needing any variances or anything like that. So it does fit their master plan in general. They'll still have to submit an elevation certificate before a building permit will be approved, and they're working on that right now.
Any questions? Seeing none, we're ready for a motion.
This is Jerza. I move to approve.
Did you hear that, Mark?
Yep.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve. Roll call, please.
Osterloo,
Yes.
Genslinger,
Yes.
Sonny,
Yes.
Jerza,
Yes.
Malumbi.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay, hearing and recommendation, ordinance number 2022-01, repealing, readopting, and amending zoning regulations for cannabis establishments.
So I'll just give you the brief overview on this one. As you're all probably well aware, we've been going through the process of handling the initial applications for medical cannabis dispensaries. Throughout that process, we discovered some difficulties in applying the buffer zones. Mainly the language that we had in the current ordinance does exclude right-of-way. As we came to find out, there's a lot of situations around town where you start applying that from a point-to-point basis where the line between those properties ends up running either through extremely wide right-of-ways or by long stretches through a single right-of-way. So I don't think that that was ever the initial intent of the ordinance that we adopted back in the spring, summer of last year. So to simplify it, bring it back in line with what the original intent was, and to try to kind of accommodate some of the conversations that arose while we were processing those initial variance applications, this is what staff came up with. And it's very simple, it's very straightforward. It just removes that right-of-way language from the distance calculations, so you just calculate the total distance between the two properties and leave it at that. The distances remain the same. I think staff thinks that that's the simplest solution. There were other discussions that took place about, do you go back and increase the distance then to accommodate what the right-of-way would have been, or do you change how you're measuring it? Do you measure it from door to door instead of property line to property line? Ultimately, we think this is the simplest approach for the time being, and if we needed to reevaluate it in the future, we've always got that opportunity to go back and do that again. The other section that you see in this ordinance fixes what was basically a typo back when we originally adopted it. It ended up getting codified into the wrong title of our code. It was always intended to go into our zoning code, our zoning title, but it ended up in the building regulations title. So that's why you see sections 1 and section 2 listed out. One is really just a clerical fix, and then the second one is the language for removing the right-of-way language. So with that, I'll leave it open for any questions or comments.
I would agree with the property line stance. I think you can't really forecast where a building is going to be built on the property. So if you start saying door to door, well, where is that? So you might set it at 1,000, and then a couple of years later, it's down to 800 because the property is large. I would agree with that approach.
And this is going by the way the bird flies, just
Correct.
Yep.
This is-
right angles to the.
Yep.
No.
Closest point, property line, property line.
Yeah, I mean, really, as we started discovering the error, or, well, I guess the oversight, as we were processing those other variances, we tried to come up with several other ways to try to make that distance calculation work and still do the exclusion of the right-of-way, but, it was either very convoluted in how you had to do that, or, it didn't really line up with the original intent, and it was always going to be ambiguous one way or the other, no matter how you did it. So we felt that this was a much simpler approach.
I personally agree with this approach. When I was voting on these variances prior to the last variances for the cannabis, that's the way I looked at it in my voting. I think the right-of-way should be included.
And I guess just for the commission's benefit going forward, if you're looking at the existing applications and things that are still pending out there. Under the proposed ordinance here, there's only 2 of those applications that would still need any kind of a variance. And that would be the one that's downtown due to the distance to a church, and it would be the one on Juniper for distance to another dispensary. So we would eventually be bringing those back to go through the variance request process again.
Is there any thought behind the 1,000 foot mark? Is that just kind of an arbitrary number that got picked and that's what we went with? I'm just thinking ahead because the next applicant is going to be 850 feet. They're going to be pretty close. You know, we have to debate then the spirit of the code versus what was written. What's the intent behind the 1,000?
So originally, the 1,000 feet lined up with more of what the state regulations provided. You know, they have a 1,000-foot buffer from schools. You know, we also chose that number in an attempt to try to make sure that the dispensaries aren't too close together, but, you know, that's also a bit subjective. You know, as you pointed out, one of the applications is going to be coming back and having that request where it's going to be, I think, about 850 feet versus 1,000. And I think that that's the appropriate type of situation to consider a variance because you've got a number of unique circumstances surrounding that one that could potentially justify a variance. You know, it's off on a different street. It's not going to be visible from the other dispensary. The dispensary that was in line before that one is located on an extremely large lot, and if you include the distance from building to building, it's well over 1,000 feet. You know, there's a number of different things that you can look at while considering that variance and probably decide either way depending on how you weigh those facts. So,
And Justin, it's not 850 feet from a school, it's from another dispensary.
right.
Which is,
So,
should be considered.
yeah, so you'll have, I mean, there's always a question as to what number you could put there, but that was the reason it was originally picked, and I guess as a matter of, you know, keeping this process timely and keeping everything simple. At this point, we've got a clear path forward, so I don't think it's necessarily worth considering different distance at this
I'm
time.
not asking for that reason. I think it's more for the next meeting when we have to consider variances. Where'd the 1,000 come from? So if it's a hard and fast number, we want to stick to it. Well, then that's a different story than, well, we just want to keep them separated, right? So you have to, that's where the spirit comes in, and we're trying to figure out what the city council was thinking and what their intent was versus what got written. So
Right, and
that was my question more than anything.
Yep, and you know, I guess I'm the one that originally drafted the language, and I can tell you my intent when I wrote it, and that doesn't mean it was the council's intent when they adopted it, but it was more to make sure that you don't have a bunch of them lined up right next to each other, so it looks like that's all you've got, you know.
And the state only regulates 1,000 from schools. That's their only regulation. There isn't anything from dispensary to dispensary, so we went further with that.
Does the state got any rules and regs on churches?
Their only thing was just education centers.
Yep,
correct?
yep, and they, for their purposes, their schools are only the K through 12 type schools. It's not colleges or preschools.
So then, basically, when people are looking for variances, you know, we always talk about hardship. So where do you get a hardship here? Because of the feet, you know? I mean, what kind of hardship? You can't change it. So is that a hardship? You know, if they do it because of the 1,000 feet?
Well, that's for us to figure out, right?
Well,
They
that's
should
it.
be,
I mean, it's gonna be coming up.
they should be
That's what I'm saying.
demonstrating.
It's gonna be coming up, so
Yeah.
you look at it, is it a hardship or isn't it a hardship?
they really should be coming in here demonstrating that they can't do it any other way.
Right, without buying another.
A different property.
Leasing.
Yeah.
And they're gonna end up doing it anyhow. Some of them will have to. But if that's all the state has just for that. Ours is a little bit tougher.
Mhm.
You know, so, and if that's what the city council and you guys agreed on, you know, that's what we need.
Yeah, I don't think that the implication is that there should never be a variance granted. Otherwise, you wouldn't have the variance process in there at all. But, you know, as you said, you've got to weigh out the facts and determine when they're appropriate. And that's what that process is for. And that's the process that we'll be working through here within the next couple months or weeks.
Any other comments? At that point, I guess we're ready for a motion.
I'll make a motion to recommend approval.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second to recommend approval. Roll call, please.
Genslinger,
Yes.
Sonny,
Yes.
Jurza,
Yes.
Osterloo,
Yes.
Malumbi.
Yes.
Motion carried. I will say that this now actually, if it does go all the way through, will line up with our maps that we have out there as well, because when we drew our maps, it didn't take into account any of the right-of-ways.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, they'll still be a little bit off because obviously we're doing circles instead of all the way out on some of the blocks, but it'll be closer to the maps that people see.
So, I got a question, you know, that the one out there by Walmart, if you guys do not accept this, the city council, I know this is our recommendation, you don't. So what does that end up doing there? They gotta start over then too?
They will have to apply for a variance and go through the process as well. So they have been approved for their license right now, but we have not issued them their certificate of
Compliance to the state.
So this will clean this up really easy,
Yep.
make it easiest for us too as long. I guess as long as how we stick with it, you know, that would be, that's the big one.
Any other discussion? Any other business to come before this board? Public input, if you need to address the city planning on an item that was not on the agenda, excluding personnel items, please come forward to the podium. That only leaves you two out there. State your name and your concern. Presentation limited to 3 minutes. Items will be considered, but no action taken. Seeing none, we're adjourned.